I just saw the best movie of the entire year, and I didn't understand a single word of it. If you don't know what I'm talking about Parasite, the new movie from Bong Joon-ho, who's a Korean director most famous probably for Snowpiercer, and I could make a whole video talking about Snowpiercer, but we do not have time for that. I've seen a lot of stuff on the internet about Parasite. A lot of people think it means a lot of different things. But I have a completely different theory, and hear me out, Parasite is Home Alone. Before I explain why I'm comparing this Korean art film to a 1990s American comedy about an 8-year-old kid named Kevin, I want to talk about some things on the internet that I've seen of people who think they know what Parasite is, and why they're wrong. The first thing that I've seen going around is that Parasite is an allegory for climate change. And while that's really fitting and would be really convenient and timely, I just don't think that's the case. There's a scene in the movie, I don't want to spoil it, but there's a major climate disaster happens. We'll call it that. And this major climate disaster affects several of our main characters, and it makes things really difficult for them. These characters are already impoverished, and so you could read this as a way of telling the audience about how climate change disproportionately affects people in poverty. In the movie, the rich people live up on a hill, and the poor people live down, basically like adjacent to the sewer system. And so that allegory tracks. The issue is, that's like 15 minutes out of a basically 2-hour movie, and the events of the movie conspire and move past this event in such a way where the characters even acknowledge that the major climate disaster doesn't actually matter. It really doesn't change anything for them, and that the events of the movie are going to play out kind of no matter what, and we never hear anything about the major climate disaster again. So I'm gonna solidly rule out Parasite is not a climate change movie. The second thing that I've seen people saying on the internet is that this movie is somehow about the conflict between North and South Korea. There are a couple references that point to this. At one point, the father of the family says that he can drive anywhere below the 38th parallel, just sort of chucking in there that, we are in a world in which there's a North and South Korea. And just to remind you that we're in South Korea and there is a North Korea. At another point, a character, during a really dramatic, tension-filled moment, starts imitating a North Korean dictator or a North Korean news network, just doing a broadcast from a dictator. The thing about this, taking it seriously, is that I think all references to North Korea in the movie are pretty clearly jokes. You could get really deep and start to think about characters allegorically, and like, if that person who is imitating the dictator is this person, then that means this character over here represents such and such, but I don't think the movie is asking us to think too deeply about those things. I think it's just a joke, and you're overthinking it. So I'm gonna rule out that Parasite is secretly an allegory for the relationship between North and South Korea. The third thing that I've seen a lot of writing about, that I think there is actually some truth to, is that Parasite is a movie about class struggle and class relationships. We start on a super poor family. They're so poor, they live in like the sub-basement of another house. We see their toilet is like raised up in a window in like the little corner of a bathroom, so you have to like hunch over when you're using the toilet. We see them searching for free Wi-Fi because they don't have the money to pay their Wi-Fi bill. They leave their windows open when the fumigator is coming by, so that they don't have to get their house fumigated, or they don't have to pay somebody. And they just sit there while the like chemicals wash over them. They're like very clearly poor, and this is not a spoiler, it's in the trailer. They end up in a situation where all 4 members of the family can get employed by this extremely wealthy family, and through series of twists and turns and plots and counterplots, they end up, removing the entire house staff of this rich family and replacing them all with their own family members. There's a great scene where also in the trailer. This is in the trailer too. There's a great scene where they're all the rich family has gone away for the weekend, and so our main character family is sitting around drinking, and one of them says like, "Oh, they're so nice," and then another one says like, "Well, they're only nice because they're rich," and like, if I was that rich, I would be that nice too. And then they all start to make fun of the rich people, and also to talk about what they would do if they had all that money. And that's true. It paints a very accurate picture of what the issue of what the class struggle in the 21st century looks like, and the incredible damage that wealth disparity can do to people, and the straight up crazy things that people will do when they need money. But that's not what the movie is about. That's the frame that the picture goes in, if that makes sense. Because I say that because the movie doesn't actually provide any solutions to class struggle, and the end of the movie isn't so much about here's the point. There isn't a thing that you could walk away from this movie saying, I truly understand the class struggle better. Maybe if you're a super wealthy person, maybe it did have that effect on you, and that's a good thing. And then for you, maybe that is the point of the movie. I just think there's actually something deeper here, something far closer to the point of Home Alone. The first thing I want to say is that Parasite is really funny. It's like probably 75 minutes of the movie, like the first 75 minutes of the movie are like mostly jokes, and they're really funny jokes, even though like I don't speak Korean, and I'm sure the jokes are even funnier in Korean, but just like reading them off the subtitles and watching the way that the actors like play with each other on screen, it's hilarious. Like, I was watching this movie with the Minneapolis Film Society. It was at one of their film screenings, and so I'm there with like a lot of people who are like movie buffs, and we're all there to like watch and judge this movie that we know is like, a contender for a bunch of awards, and it's like won the like Palme d'Or at Cannes, and we started like we got like 30 minutes in, and we were just like looking around at each other like, this is funny. Like, this, like, very good, very beautiful cinematically, and incredibly interesting, and the movie flies by. You like don't even notice the 2 hours of your life have passed by, and also it's just funny. It makes you want to laugh. Some really hilarious stuff happens that is like is not language based at all. It's a funny movie. But apart from it being a comedy, I think it has some real similarities to the cultural impact of Home Alone. To understand that, we have to cast our minds back to when Home Alone came out, and that was November 1990. And we have to think about what was happening during this time period. Basically, all around America, baby boomers were really starting to have families, not just a couple kids, but at this point, baby boomers, for the most part, had full families of children who were not grown up yet. And that's exactly what we see in Home Alone. We see this family where the parents were born probably sometime in the 50s, post World War II, part of that baby boom generation. And they have a family that's rather large, but probably still not as large as the families that they grew up in. And we see these baby boomers dealing with raising their own family for the first time and trying to be more attentive parents than their parents were to them. Baby boomers' parents had to deal with war, and a lot of fathers died during World War II. And so a lot of people of that generation grew up either without fathers, or it was still a time, in the 60s when fathers went to work and mothers stayed at home. And so this whole two-parent system really wasn't coming around until about the 1980s. And so at the time that Home Alone comes out, we were just at the tail end of the 80s, in this new decade, the 90s, and everybody's still trying to figure out what that means, and George H.W. Bush is president. I don't know if that's true. And all these baby boomers who haven't had a model for what parenting is supposed to look like as far as like a two-parent system are now having to figure it out. At the same time, we have the war on drugs. Reagan's war on drugs is still going on into the beginning of the 90s, and a lot of that includes children's education programs like DARE, or Scared Straight, things that are about teaching children about the dangers of the world. Something that was very well-intentioned and poorly executed, and leads to what we now sort of know as helicopter parenting. And these parents who are over-attentive and overprotective of their children to the point where children don't really get to have a childhood. And that's what I think the point of Home Alone is it's not so much about a broad class struggle or trying to understand why the criminals are breaking into the home during Christmas, or even a commentary on Christmas at all. It's a moral movie. Home Alone, for as much as it's a slapstick comedy, the little nugget of truth that's inside of there is it's a movie that's trying to let parents know that your kids are actually going to be okay if, say you forget them during your trip to Paris, or if you need to leave your kids home alone overnight, well, you and your spouse go off and do something, that the kids are going to be okay. And kids are naturally curious and creative, and also they can actually take care of themselves, and you don't need to be watching your child's every move. Your kid isn't going to get murdered. And I think that's what the message of Home Alone to parents is that let kids be kids. So now to bring everything back to my original point, which is that Parasite is the Home Alone of 2019. Let's take a look at that same family, that 1990s baby boomer family, and they're just starting to figure out how to have like a whole family all together. If we take that family and we put them now, all of those kids are adults, and we've been dealing with this new meaning of young adult and these new expectations for young adults. Our parents' generation went to college or didn't, graduated straight out of high school, but as soon as you were done with school, you had a job, and you had a career path, and you chose that, and you stuck to it. And that was what you were going to do for the rest of your life. But today, because of, economic troubles and the changing relationship of the job market to the educational field, that doesn't work so much anymore. Most people change careers 4 or 5 times now. And it happens the most before like the age of 35. And so we're in this new time where we're negotiating the relationship of parent and child, but now it's parent on the cusp of retirement and young adult child. And that's a tricky and complex relationship in itself, and that's exactly what Parasite is about. We have a family where none of them are stable. And none of them have a stable, successful career. And nobody has a plan for the future, and yet somehow that's okay. What we see instead is the family literally embodies several different careers, several different career options. They imagine what it would be like to be this rich family that they're working for. They have this whole party scene where they sort of embody that life and see what that's like, and they pretend to be art teachers and math tutors and university students all at once. And at the same time, they know that they're not that, and that there are plenty of other things that they would like to do. And I think that's actually a really brilliant allegory for the modern world, especially with the onset of the internet. And I know everything is about the internet at some point. Everything we make is about the internet now. But the way in which the internet has affected people's career paths, the ability to Photoshop documents from a home computer and make them extremely realistic, good enough to fake your way into a job, calls into question whether you should go to college at all. Obviously, the point can't be the degree anymore, because I could print out a super realistic degree, or pay somebody who I find on the internet, maybe $100, and I could have that piece of paper that looks legitimate. So what then is the value in our old entrenched systems when we live in a day and age where everything can be so easily falsified? And I think what Parasite is trying to say is that those systems, those customs, have intrinsic value. And that had these characters who fake their way through life, and they do it so convincingly, but had they actually had the life experience that they pretend to have, this situation, the ending of the movie, never would have happened. So anyway, that's my thoughts on Parasite. I think it's the best movie of the year, and I also think it is the Home Alone of 2019. It is slapstick, and it makes a point about parent-child relationships in the modern era, in an age where it's incredibly difficult to define what those relationships are supposed to look like. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I kind of liked doing this style, and I'm going to try to do some more of this in the future. So let me know what you think. And Joe, I will talk to you later. I love you. Bye.